Hey everybody, it's Chris from Beer Bearings. Welcome to another Beer of the Week. It's Friday. It's the first weekend of what would be Jazz Fest. It's always going to be Jazz Fest, even if we're not actually having a festival, as we are not, again this year, at the fairgrounds because of the coronavirus pandemic. This is the second year in a row that we haven't actually been able to all get together out there. It's a beautiful day. It would have been a beautiful first day to Jazz Fest. It traditionally storms on the first day of Jazz Fest, or it seems like it does, but this year it's just absolutely gorgeous and crisp and kind of cool almost. So I'm wearing my favorite Jazz Fest shirt in honor of the fact that it's Jazz Fest, no matter if we're actually getting out there in person or not. I'm talking about Hella Weizen today, which is from Miel Brewery. It is a Hefeweizen, a wheat beer. It's going to have some nice banana and clove notes, I will guarantee. I'm going to go ahead and pour it because I think it's going to take a couple of minutes to settle, and I can talk about wheat beers a little bit and talk a little bit about German words for things that get confusing sometimes. This is a Pilsner glass. I don't actually have a proper weissbier glass, but it's the right shape, and it's just a little bit smaller than it should be to hold this entire can, but I'm going to do my best for you to give you an idea of what it looks like when it pours. There are some actually pretty good YouTube videos on pouring wheat beers, pouring weiss beers in particular, the right way. And it's kind of fun to watch. So I will link to at least one of those in the notes below. But here we go. So 50% wheat in the grist on this, which is going to produce a nice rocky head. So I'm going to really pour it pretty aggressively right down the center. And you can see all of that foam forming. That glass is also pretty well rinsed ahead of time. You want to make sure it's nice and clean. I'm going to let that settle just for a second, then we ought to be able to really build that foam up above, there we go, above the top of the glass. So that's all of that foam is coming from the fact that there is at least 50% wheat in the grist. I talked to Alex over at Miel. They do it that way. And that's going to persist, again, because of all that protein in the wheat. It's going to be there for a bit while it settles. I can probably even get it to be a little bit higher here in a minute or two as it kind of coalesces a little bit. First of all, this beer is unusual because it's an ale, and Germany is dominated certainly these days by lagers, although there are certainly a lot of kind of regional ales and hybrids that are around. And there are some confusing words, especially for American beer drinkers and people who are not German, frankly. So there's the word Weiss, which means white in German. There's Weizen, which is where the confusion comes in, which means wheat. And then there's Hefe, which means yeast. So a Hefeweizen is a wheat beer with yeast. And what that means is traditionally these are bottle conditioned and actually will change a little bit in the bottle, and there will be some yeast left behind. And during the pour, which you'll see, the server will actually agitate either by shaking it or literally rolling the bottle around, and they come in bottles typically, and depositing that last little bit of yeast on the top, just like a little cherry on the top, if you will, of the beer. They're unusual too in that they have a lot of banana and clove notes, and that comes all from yeast. None of that is derived from putting, banana extract or clove extract or anything weird like that in the beer. Those are all phenols that the yeast produces during fermentation. They are traditionally fermented open. Now, I don't think Alex did that over at Miel, and you won't find too many American brewers who do. Live Oak Brewery over in Austin is well known for a really good Hefeweizen, and I don't even think they have open fermentation over there. So very unusual these days, but let's give it a taste. I've got it as full as I can get it. And I do see a little bit of yeast kind of suspended in here as it starts to settle some. So, Prost. Yeah, definitely that banana and clove right off the bat. Again, all from yeast. So very cool what yeast can do. Banana clove, a little bit of vanilla as well. Also part of the characteristic flavor of this beer. Also kind of coming from the yeast. There's a very light touch on the hops too, which leaves behind an impression of sweetness in the beer. Again, no lactose, nothing like that. It's just the malt sweetness coming through without a whole lot of hops to counterbalance it. So It's one more way that a brewer can start to impart some sweetness without actually having to use sugar or anything like that. So these beers are unusual because, again, they're wheat beers. And if you know your Reinheitsgebot, and I think we've talked about Reinheitsgebot before, if we haven't, here's the thumbnail version. It is a 400-year-old German beer purity law and also a tax law that mandates the use primarily of malted barley, water hops, and later yeast once they figured out that there was yeast. Remember, 400 years old. We didn't know what yeast was 400 years ago. We thought it was magic, kind of. So that law, still in effect and still active today, mandates only barley, but there were some exceptions for using wheat in beer, and most of those exceptions actually went to brewers who produced beer for the crowned heads of the time. So the King of Bavaria, for example, would have been the benefactor of that. These are pretty funky and kind of weird. They are actually closer to things like saisons and gueuze and things like that. So these are Belgian styles, French styles that have some wild fermentation characteristics, that use some unusual yeast, that are ales, right? So this is all maybe more part of that tradition, really, in my mind, than the German lagers that will really start to come into prominence around the beginning of the 19th century. So food with these, lighter seafood dishes, salads, traditionally weisswurst, which is a German sausage made with veal and back bacon, and very kind of light and kind of almost grayish in color. Don't look very good, but they are delicious. Would be the traditional thing to have with this. You'd traditionally be sipping this in a sunny, dappled German beer garden, whiling away what's left of the afternoon. So that's what I've got this week. Hella Weizen from Miel, right up the street from where I live. It's something that they do every year. They do a really good job with it. Light-bodied, banana, clove. It's absolutely perfect. It's great for this climate, this kind of warmer weather that we're starting to get. And I want you to get out to Miel or any other local brewery and support those guys. If you are watching me on Facebook, please invite your friends over to join the discussion. If you're watching me on YouTube, also invite your friends over to join the discussion. But please also like and subscribe to the channel and click that bell to get notified of every time a new video is posted, which right now is every Friday right here on Beer Bearings. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you next time right back here on Beer of the Week. Bye-bye.